if you need our help, we're willing to help you out in this regard. We don't have to fight this out. We can help ourselves out in this regard. And likewise, let me put the issue on the other side. Muslims, there's some impression out there, not among the Muslims as much as it is among the non-Muslims, that Muslims have their own nation states or their own governments. And people who think like this don't understand Muslims. I haven't heard from a Jew, you just heard from me as a Muslim how I would internally think. Not many Muslims are brave enough or enlightened enough to present this to the general public. But I have yet to hear from a Jew the fact that Muslims are living in a diaspora of their own. We haven't been living in this diaspora as long as the Jews have, but virtually every Muslim in this world doesn't belong authoritatively to the governments that are ruling them. So we are in exile. Now how come people who are Muslims who are currently in exile and Jews who were up until 60 years ago in exile, how come they can't understand what it means to coexist with each other? This is the problem that we are having. And the Muslims are, and they are coming, if the Jews are not as quick as to identify the evils of Zionism, Muslims are quickly identifying the evils of the governments that rule them. So right now, it's one of those rare moments in history where there's a common opportunity for Muslims and Jews together to undo the governments that mutually rule over both of them and to resume a life of coexistence on the basis of one citizen, one vote. But there's much that exile and oppression can do to people that makes them not see the facts as they are on the ground, and to have these political maneuverings that are called Oslo or called Camp David or they're called Annapolis recently, and I don't know what we're going to have in the future, that go nowhere. No one has moved an inch forward in all of this. Neither Muslim, nor Jew, nor Christian. No one has gotten anywhere. Because the roots of this issue, whether you like it or not, the roots of this issue are in the way we see ourselves vis-a-vis our heavenly responsibilities, vis-a-vis our Creator. These are existential issues that pose existential questions that need existential answers. I hope I answered your question.
Only gave birth to more questions. There's a question here, and this does come up quite a lot. The anti-Muslim propagandists who like to hype the Islamophobia, they like to misquote, and they pull a little thing out that says, find the Jews and the Christians and kill them where you find them and all that. And perhaps you can put that in context here.
Look, rest assured, there's nothing that says in Islamic source, scripture, and reference, nothing that says kill Christians or Jews. You know, where this comes from beats me. That's why I itch to have an informed presentation by both sides of this issue. I'd like to corner down these people who bring this type of accusation up, that Muslims are out there hunting for Christians and Jews to kill them. Where did this come from? Can they just please present to us the verse or the hadith that says something like that? Because there is none. The simple answer to that, all of this is in the minds of the imaginators. All of this comes from a psychosis that has run amok. It doesn't exist in who we are. Let me give you an example. About a century ago, there was some disturbance in Yemen. Yemen has an area there in which Muslims and Jews have been living together for well over 1,000 years. And some of these tribes turned tribalistic and forgot about their Islamic identity. So the Muslim tribes, in pursuing the other Muslim tribes, had to cross through a Jewish area in Yemen. And they plundered some of the harvests or the crops of the Jews. And the Jews of Yemen said, when they were said, look at what your Muslim neighbors have done. They've come through this area, he said, but these are not Muslims. We know through our history the character and the conduct of Muslims. They are not in their character when they do something like this. So, our history stands out for who we are. We never had the equivalence of the Crusades. We never had the equivalence of the Inquisitions, the Conquistadors, just recently, the pogroms and the genocidal policies in the Balkans. We are on the receiving end of the death policies in this world, and then they turn around and say, look, Muslims are out there to kill Christians and Jews. That's nonsense.
In the Quran, there are certain things which can be misconstrued. For example, don't make Christians and Jews your friends and stuff like that. And that is the partial phrase that people catch on to and then pretend that that's the whole Quran.
Yes, you bring up a very good point, and a sister before you came up, and she mentioned there's a verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the table spread, that's the 5th chapter of the Quran. And that verse says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَتَّخِذُوا الْيَهُودَ وَالنَّصَارَى أَوْلِيَاءَ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. This ayah, this verse, which has the approximate following meaning in English, says, O you who are divinely committed, do not designate al-Yahud and al-Nasara as your political superiors. Now, al-Yahud and al-Nasara are translated in your run-of-the-mill translation of the Quran as Jews and Christians. This is an inaccurate translation, because many times the fine meaning of the words in the Quran are defined by context. So when you find the word al-Yahud and the other word al-Nasara in the Quran, and these are two Quranic words, the context will define whether we are speaking about religious Jews and religious Christians, or whether we are speaking about political Jews and political Christians. In this particular ayah, the meaning is, O you who are firmly committed to God, do not align yourselves or do not designate political Jews and political Christians as your superiors or as your allies. What does this have to do when we're speaking about political blocks in this world? What does this have to do with the one-on-one relationship between a Muslim individual on one side and a Jewish and Christian individual on another side? But here we have it. First of all, we have an issue of mistranslation. The word awliya does not mean friend in this ayah, which has become the standard translation of the ayah. And then the word Christian and Jew in this ayah does not mean the